Senator Peris.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Tonight I rise to support the condolence motion for Nelson Mandela. I express my heartfelt condolences to his family and friends and to the people of South Africa. You have lost a friend, a leader and a mentor, a true father to your country and a shining inspiration to the world. Many, many people throughout the world have found inspiration in his life and his actions. I particularly pay my personal respects to Mandela, the eventual victor over the evil scheme of apartheid. To me, this will always be his greatest achievements. He was a fighter for freedom, a symbol of justice, equality and dignity. His personal sacrifice inspired people throughout the world to do all they could for human rights. From the outset, he's made his intentions clear. He did all that he could show that he did not accept the way South Africa was governed. He set a clear path to show how it should be. His life journey is a man's triumphal march towards freedom, and with that focus, he inspired millions of people to share that journey. He once said, "The chains of the body are often wings to the spirit." He truly believed this, and he never gave up his struggle. Whilst he was physically imprisoned for 27 years, he was never a captive. Inspirationally, he then became a dignified advocate for reconciliation. His own hope and refusal to be intimidated became a powerful weapon. When nothing else seemingly remained, it sustained him. My personal experience with the apartheid regime goes back to February 1994, just 2 months before Mandela became president. I travelled to South Africa with the Australian Hockey Roos team. It was my first time to South Africa, and it was the most memorable one. I had known little about the apartheid system apart from the fact that it institutionally hated black people, so I was quite nervous as we arrived. I knew there was an election coming up, and we were scheduled to play a 3-game test series. I've always thought about the moral position on social inclusion in sport, and it is very clear. Non-discrimination is an essential part of true sportsmanship. We should never be willing partners in perpetrating any system of discrimination. No discrimination should be allowed in any person on the grounds of race, gender, religion or political affiliation. An historic moment occurred that day in the first test, as it was the first time a black South African was to play for South Africa. I didn't really comprehend the full significance of that moment until much later. It was my 50th international match for Australia, so it was a personally significant day for me as well. South Africa was new on the international sporting circus because of the international sporting ban imposed during the apartheid. We won that game, and at a reception after, I got talking to the black South African player and became immersed in our conversation about the history of sport and the apartheid regime. One of my hockey room teammates asked her about the ball boys and girls, who are all black kids dressed in white uniforms, including socks, shoes and hats. My teammate expressed her unhappiness about there not being a full mix of kids, as it was quite clear having only black kids certainly wasn't inclusive of all South Africans. The black South African player said to her, "Please don't be upset with this. It is an honour for us to be here." I couldn't really comprehend what she meant was an honour. I thought it was just outright racist. But then she explained to me that she felt in a country that had no justice or freedom for black people for so long, she now saw that there was an opportunity and a way forward, something that was previously always denied and totally forbidden. I remember that time in Johannesburg so well. There was so much tension around with the election looming. In fact, a car bomb had exploded near a hotel just days before we arrived. Although the official end of the apartheid occurred in 1990 with the repeal of the last remaining apartheid laws, the end of the apartheid is widely regarded as following on from the 1994 democratic elections where Nelson Mandela became president. It was an amazing and most historical, memorable time in my sporting career and life to be there during the final stages of the apartheid. These memories to me believe that we must learn from the past in order to prepare for the future. It certainly was a time when I stepped into the unknown, and it was one of those experiences which have stayed with me and which I draw upon often. What I'd learnt most from the tour was that black South Africans often simply had to accommodate themselves according to opportunities. It was then I learnt also that people had an enormous capacity for adjusting to their circumstance. Mandela's own long walk to freedom has shaped South African history, from colonisation to apartheid to a democracy. His life assumed epic qualities. Mandela became a global figure, symbolic of the struggle for justice. For 27 years during his incarceration, Mandela defined the word sacrifice. He fought and stood against racial separation and the ridiculous notion of white supremacy. After that time in 1994, I did not return back to South Africa until 1998, and then travelled back annually throughout my sporting career from 1998 to 2001. I became friends during my crack track career with an South African woman who ran for South Africa. We spoke often about the apartheid system in her country that she'd been born into. Heidi spoke often about Mandela and how he was an extraordinary man and an exceptional leader. After my sporting career ended, I travelled back to South Africa more regularly. Just last year, I met the Reverend Michael Lapsley. He was born in New Zealand and ordained in Australia. In 1973, he was born in New Zealand. He went to South Africa as a young Anglican priest, where he became chaplain to both black and white students at the very height of the apartheid. He was elected to the university chaplain in 1976, the year of the Soweto uprising, which many black school children were shot and killed. He used this as a public forum to speak out on behalf of students who'd been shot, detained and tortured, and were soon expelled from South Africa. He spent the next 16 years in Zimbabwe as a chaplain to the liberation movement in exile in April 1990. 3 months after Mandela's release from the prison, he was sent a letter bomb from the agents of the apartheid regime, disguised as religious literature. In the blast, he lost both his hands, the sight of one eye, and was severely burned. In 1993, after returning to South Africa, Father Michael became a chaplain of the Torture Centre for Victims of Violence and Torture in Cape Town. In 1998, he formed the Institute for Healing of Memories. He challenges individuals and communities to move through a journey of healing towards forgiveness and reconciliation. Father Michael says of his own experience, "I have travelled the journey from being a freedom fighter to being a healer, and in some small measure my journey reflects the journey of South Africa. There was time to slay the monster of the apartheid, but now we have democracy. It's time to heal, reconcile and rebuild." I personally believe that when stories are heard and acknowledged, individuals feel healed and empowered through the deep listening and meaningful sharing, human relationships can be transformed and restored. There is no easy walk to freedom anywhere. Many of us will have to pass through the valley of the shadow of death again and again before we reach the mountaintop of our desires. This famous quote says it all. Each day that I was in Cape Town, I passed by Table Mountain, always had Robben Island in full view. Together with my husband, we took the tour of Robben Island. The history of the island is just amazing. We stopped at this one place called the Limestone Quarry, where prisoners of the island, including Mandela, came to work every day from sunrise to sunset. Although they were told that the digging the quarry was for limestone, was not true. There was no use for the rock, but meaningless digging. And so they did this for many years trying to break the men's spirit. They failed for most, including Mandela. The cave in the wall was a quarry they called the university, where the newly arrived political prisoners worked side by side with the old-timers, and they schooled in the ANC and the African history, political ideologies and tactics, and it's where they planned for the future for a free South Africa. One thing I learnt from that day was from an ex-prisoner guide. He said, "Thank you for coming. I ask you to acknowledge and respect our past. Please reflect on our history. Take it with you. We have to build new bridges to reflect on the past and to do this so our children can walk over for a better future. Please pay your respect to the survivors and please spread the message of goodwill." We finally saw the cell Mandela was kept in. It was so small, no toilet, so cold. It was certainly an inspiration to our visit on the island. In fact, my husband-to-be Scott proposed to me on Robben Island during that tour. It was obviously something I'll never forget. Finally, this poem called Invictus means Unconquered, Undefeated by Ernest Henley, an English poet. Henley had written the poem from a hospital bed during a traumatic time after his leg was amputated. I'm sure he didn't know that one day, many years later, his poem would be deeply touched and to save another great man, Nelson Mandela, who survived his darkest years to become South Africa's great leader. The words were written on a piece of paper. He empowered himself and other prisoners. It's hard to believe this one poem saved Mandela's life and perhaps changed the course of history forever. The poem read, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. Out of the night that covers me, black as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. On the blurdigans of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul." Mr. Acting Deputy President, I support the condolence motion for Mr. Mandela. I'm sure his life will continue to be an inspiration for many, many years to come. Thank you.